Thank you.
One thing as special parents we have struggled the most with, wrestled the most with, is choosing the right type of school. This is the word that we use in our community. Choosing the right type of school, mainstream or special education. Today's episode, we are going to put both the perspectives in front of you with two amazing ladies that I have in the studio who are the gurus of their own field. One of them is a principal of a mainstream school, and the other one represents the special schooling because she is the head of education with that particular special school. Let me introduce you to my guest, Miss Nargis Kambata. She is the CEO and the principal of GEMS Modern Academy, a very well-renowned school here in Dubai, UAE. My second guest is Miss Lucia. She is a head of education with Widad, a special needs center here in Dubai. Welcome, ladies. First of all, I can't even explain in words how humbled, how happy, how ecstatic, and how nervous I am to have you because I know you guys are amazing at what you do. Today's episode is going to briefly cause this topic in a box, putting this perspective to the new parents who are struggling to choose a mainstream or a special education school because there's a lot of taboo around special schooling that we are going to discuss. So it's just putting both the perspectives on the table and let the parents have this clarity before putting their school in any form of education. So I'll start with you, Nargis. Thank you so much. I know you have a very, very busy schedule. See, I am so nervous. Thank you for taking your time out. My first and foremost question, the most important question that we have in the special needs community, what is inclusive education?
Thank you. Thank you for having me, Ambreen. I think I follow you on social media and I marvel at how you manage what you do. So I have huge respect for you as a mom, as an educator, and for what you're trying to do for the community.
Thank you so much.
And to come back to your question on what does inclusion actually mean? Is that your question, right? What does inclusion actually mean?
Inclusive education.
Inclusive education. Well, I know there are a lot of taboos around this space, and there's a lot of gray areas. But I think to a true educator, it doesn't matter. And inclusive education is truly inclusive. To your earlier introduction, I don't think it's finding the right school. It's finding what's right for your child. And that may differ from child to child. Yeah. So I think for me as an educator, an inclusive education is about making sure that, and we have students of all kinds. We have those who are academically inclined but are socially awkward. We have those who are socially brilliant but academically not so great. We have the athletes. We've got children with special needs. The whole spectrum is there. And tell me which one of us doesn't have needs. All of us have needs. It's just how we manage them and handle them. And so I think inclusive education is about including all of them. And sometimes we focus so much, and I'm saying this very openly, sometimes we focus so much on the children with special needs that we forget that there are other children with other and different types of needs. So for me, an inclusive education is including all of them.
All of them. Perfect. Yeah, very well put.
Yeah, and I couldn't agree more, but there's one thing that we always think when we talk about education, we always think that the student needs to be included in the school. But for me, inclusion goes beyond that. It's about including those with those different ways of learning or those different needs in the whole society. Mm-hmm. Okay, so it's providing all the different type of spaces that a child might need throughout their educational journey, so that he not only has to stick to one thing, so that there is a variety of options. Because we're not all the same, because we all learn in different ways. So by having an array of varieties, having an array of different options, I think that is inclusion, because that provides a place for everybody in our bigger society. So sometimes we think of, the schools need to be inclusive. No, I think the society as a whole has to be inclusive.
I agree, and schools actually are a microcosm of society.
Yeah.
So, if you can replicate society in a miniature form, that's your school.
Yeah.
And just an expansion of that becomes society.
Yeah.
Very well put. So, Nargis, evaluation and assessment. A parent comes to you and how do you assess the child, or are there any tools that you use, you as a principal or as an educator? Parents meet you and you see that there is a problem, there is a concern. So are there any assessment tools or any evaluation tools that you specifically
Before I
use?
even come to assessment, I do want to say that especially in the early years, many a times parents don't disclose to us, and I think they are doing a bigger disservice to their child by not disclosing.
Yeah.
Because when they disclose it, it's just that the intervention, the sooner the intervention, the better the impact. And I think, so that's the first thing I would say to parents: please don't hide anything from the school. It's like going to your doctor and trying to hide symptoms. So please share. I mean, the fact that a school is an inclusive school means it's welcoming special children with open arms, children with special needs, not special children. I have a friend, Gulshan, who often tells me that you have to look at the child first and the need next. So that's a lesson I've never forgotten. So we do have an array of tools, but I think the first thing starts with observation, and we look and see in as natural an environment as we can put the child in. And sometimes we have parents sit in as well because of separation anxiety. The child may not, want to be separated. We've got our regular teachers who are well trained in observing for anomalies. They are the first point of contact. So it's a regular class teacher who will observe and look at the child. And I'm talking about early years now. At different levels, we have different ways of evaluation. But at the early years, they sit in the class in an as natural an environment as possible. If they think something is amiss, they bring it to the special educator's attention, and then they'll have that conversation. I think we still go through observations for about a week. We don't, especially in the early years, we don't like to do an evaluation right away. But as they grow older, we've got the entire GL suite, the ARC tests and all of that. I don't want to go into the exact testing, but there are specifics that we do. All children get put through a CAT-4. The CAT-4, the cognitive ability test, evaluates you on 4 things really: the verbal, non-verbal, quantitative and spatial. And if the score comes anything less than 85, then that becomes a red flag, and we inquire into it. And then you have the entire GL suite, of tests for special education, and to really pinpoint what is the matter. It could be a specific learning need. It could be the child could be on the spectrum, on the autism spectrum. The child could be. There's so many. Neurodiverse. Situations. So it just depends on what it is. But I think my message to parents would be, don't hide anything. The more you disclose, the better it is for the school, because they can put an entire ecosystem in place for your child to make sure your child thrives. Testing is just one small part of it. The testing is just a way of knowing, all right, this is the specific problem, but schools have their own array of systems in place.
So is there any department that does it?
Yes, we have an inclusion department. We have a head of inclusion who usually sits in the middle management or senior management, so that he or she has a voice. And where they don't, it's usually the principal or the vice principal who line manages the department. So it's a very robust system in place, and they get the support of the school. Of course, the KHDA and Dubai themselves have a very strong inclusion policy and directives that come to us. So, and that helps as well. But I must say, most of our schools have been inclusive schools since inception. But I must say, in the last 15 years, what KHDA has done, what the government has done for inclusion has been phenomenal.
Things are better than before. Okay, perfect. So, Lucia, when parents come to you, usually to all those who do not know, my children, my twins, go to a special school. I struggled with mainstream, to be honest. I'll be really raw. Because they had behaviors, they were non-speaking at that time. They were 3.5. So most of the schools were reluctant, right? I was just told that we're not well equipped to cater their needs. And then I visited special schools, and I ended up with a special school. I am really happy with them, because I decided at one point, as a parent, you also know your child. So I kept working on them in therapy, but I ended up with a special school, and I am happy with them because they're happy, they're learning, they're thriving. So, Lucia, when special parents come to you, usually they have been, they're hurt.
They are a bit at a different stage.
Yeah.
Usually the first stage is where they go to mainstream education because they're wanting to start the educational journey. By the time they get to us is usually because they have encountered a number of difficulties, a number of letdowns sometimes, a number of things that they have to start accepting, because there is already a sign, there is an indication that there is something that is happening. And for us, it's usually a parent with a bigger acceptance that comes. Still, it is true that there are many parents that don't disclose things completely, even though that they are already committing to this journey of education, which is special education. But they're already at a more, okay, I know what's happening. I know that there is something happening. How can you help me? For us, it's very important the first thing is to have a psycho-evaluation, psychoeducation evaluation from a psychological department, a private entity or an independent entity that does a complete report so that we get a clear diagnosis. For us, it's very important to have a clear diagnosis. And sometimes I think that has a pros and cons. Sometimes pros because you get to know, okay, what is the diagnosis? What are the common traits? What do I need to learn about this diagnosis? But then the cons are also that I don't like the tagging. Tagging sometimes is something that we put a label and that label stays there forever. And it is sometimes it breaks a bit my heart to know that okay, he's on the spectrum, and everybody automatically makes himself a picture of themselves, of that child in their head, that sometimes it doesn't relate with reality. A spectrum is a spectrum. There are 100 different types of children in the spectrum. So that's why I think that it has pros and cons.
I'm sorry to cut you. Do you think what I feel is sometimes it's more about the parent as well, because they are scared of the tags and the labels.
Yeah.
They somewhat ignore the child and his needs, and it's like what the society is going to say. He's going to a special school.
There's both. There's the parent that the diagnosis gives them peace of mind, because finally they've gotten an answer.
They've understood.
And that's finally there's somebody that has labeled what is happening.
They got the answer.
And that gives a bit of peace of mind for many parents. For other parents, as you say, it starts a whole process of acceptance, which is a hard one. It is a tough one, and that's where we come a little bit more prepared, because, I mean, I see parents weekly with their stories, with their tears, with their drama, and I am prepared for that. I do that every day. I do that every single week. I see a parent with a new story, a different journey, with their difficulties, and I think that I am very well trained in listening to that and giving them the possible solutions to help them a bit. So,
can I just add to that? So I think you're so right, and I think sometimes we forget about what the parents are going through in this entire equation, and that's so important. But my question to parents always is that, what do you want for your child? What does education for your child mean? Getting them into mainstream school for the the social aspect, for making sure that they're learning what they need to be learning. But I would caution against parents being, and I'm saying this with absolute humility, having had conversations with, like yourself, with hundreds of parents who want the best for their child. But I think sometimes parents don't know what is best for their child. And what's what they want for their child versus what's best for their child. And sometimes it's not just the academic outcomes that you should be really looking for. And we do find that sometimes parents are overly fixated on academic outcomes for the child and say, no, my child. But what do you want for your child? My own sister has a Down syndrome girl. She's 35 now, and she was so clear that these are the 6 or 7 things that she wanted for her. She wanted independence. She said, after I'm gone, I want my child to be able to look after herself. Does she have the skill set? That's the first thing that I really want for her. So these are things that you need to ask. Parents need to introspect and say, what is good for my child, not what I want for my child.
Clarity. And Nergis, when you go to mainstream schools, obviously we are living in a country that is so inclusive. Of all the countries that I've seen, and they are trying their best to be more inclusive with every passing year. I mean, I've started my journey with schooling almost 9 years back, and it has come a long way. But when you go to classrooms, I'm talking about mainstream specifically, and we are talking about different needs because it's a spectrum. There's diversity in the special needs arena as well. So do you think that right now the classrooms are, I'm talking about the sensory side, kids, are they sensory friendly? Because this is what I hear from the parents, that it's a struggle. A child on the spectrum needs to walk after every 10 minutes just to regulate himself, or he needs to stim, or he needs to, tap his chest. It helps him. My kids do it all the time. But it's the acceptance that becomes a problem, because he's disturbing the class. The LSA has to take the child out of the class. That's a struggle that parents are facing. So how can you work on that, making the classrooms more inclusive when it comes to sensory problems, because that's the biggest struggle.
Yeah, I think the inclusivity of a school is defined by two things. One is the people that manage the special education department, and how competent they are, and how invested they are, and how committed they are. And believe me, I have so much respect for special educators, because I think they're a different breed. The level of commitment they have is, I don't know, I've never seen this kind of commitment ever before. So I think it depends on that, and I think it also depends on how leadership views inclusion, and what is the investment that the school puts in for making sure that the right equipment is there, the right policies are in place, and not policies as in a document, but making sure it's in practice. I see it I can only speak for GEM schools, and I see it happen in many, many of our schools. Everything that you mentioned is in place. It's not that it's not in place. In fact, students are given a buddy, and the buddy makes sure that when the child needs a break, even if the teacher forgets, which is rare, the child will say, he or she needs a break, and they'll go with them and come back in, or the LSA goes out with them, if there is an LSA. My mind is crowded just now, because there's just so much that schools are doing, which I think is not being acknowledged as it should be.
And why is it that?
Before we come to the why, I'll tell you what sometimes the problem is, that in a class you have 3 or 4 children with diverse needs. That becomes a challenge, because the number of students who are coming in, we are seeing, is on the rise.
Yeah.
And you mentioned that one of the schools where you took your child, sometimes they say, we're not equipped to handle the children. Like, we got a student who's visually impaired, and we weren't equipped, but we made sure we equipped ourselves.
Yeah,
and they
nice.
learned, and including the students, and so on. She's been with us for the last 5 years now, and it's amazing. We've been on a journey. We've learned so much. But coming back to your question, so why aren't schools equipped? They are equipped. They are doing a lot. And I'm trying to say this in a manner that will be understood by everybody. Teachers have their own workload to deal with. They have portions to cover. They've got things to go through. Children within the class are very, very competitive. It's not that there will be a problem with a distraction. There isn't. Our children in our schools, when they've been sensitized, they rise to the occasion beautifully. And I think we've seen this in our schools. Our children are the ones who give the support, and they are the ones who understand, and they are the ones who step up. We've got in our schools little, those swing chairs, I don't know what they're called, where you put your feet in and you swing for children who need that sort of stimulation. Fidget spinners when they came in, the motor breaks that a child needs to take, a diabetic child sitting closer to the door to go to the washroom. I think all of this is in place. It's that one-off where, and teachers are human. Sometimes there is a slip-up, and we're not saying it's a foolproof system, we're perfect. There's no school that's perfect. I can tell you that. There's no special school that's perfect either. So I think when there's that one slip-up, I think the parent is so offended and takes it personally, and then and we understand that, and we're there. But I don't think it's for lack of effort, for lack of financial planning, and providing stuff that needs to be provided. LSAs and the costing, etc., that's another conversation to have. But I hope I've answered your question.
I also think that there is a type of school for every child.
Yes.
There are many different types of schools. And as a parent, you need to think the same question that you were asking yourself, like, what do I want? What do I think that is a priority for my child right now? As a parent, you need to think, what is the important thing right now? And if the answer is, well, my child has sensory issues, You might want to avoid any place that is huge, massive, and try to think of a smaller place, a smaller setting, a smaller... Sometimes, as parents, we need to think about, okay, where is my child? Knowing my child, and it's the parent that knows the child the best at the end, knowing my child, where is he going to be best?
Thrive better.
Where is he going to thrive? There was... I'm from Spain, and back in Spain there was a big, huge moment of parents went to the streets to protest because the government at one point removed or had the intention of closing all the specific only special education centers. And the idea was to bring all of the special education completely into the mainstream education. And they figured out that it was impossible. It was impossible, especially to do it all at once. Because they thought that the same question that you've asked us at the beginning, what is inclusion? They made the mistake of thinking that inclusion meant that one school was the best for everybody. But it isn't. There has to be a different type of places for different needs.
I'll just ask you one question here. Like, with special schooling that I have seen, because my twins are going to a special school, socializing, basically what you're trying to do, you're trying to be inclusive so that when the kids go out in the parks after school, they understand each other, they mingle in, they integrate really well. Socializing, because, we are social animals. But when I look at the special schools, there is diversity inside the school. But what I feel lacking or struggling, the most struggling point with my own kids as well, is socializing, because all day they're in an environment that is all kids almost like them. So when they go out, they struggle with socializing, and that is something that concerns me. And that is what I like about mainstream. And that is where BCBAs and that therapists, they push you to go to mainstream to expose them to the normal environment, neurotypical peers. So what's your comment on that? Because the pressure, I cannot agree with this more. Sometimes the children cannot take the pressure of the mainstream, and then the anxiety develops and there are problems. But then you want them to integrate with the normal, typical students, kids. How do you?
It shows again that there is no 100% perfect recipe, I think, in my opinion. Every little every kind of option has its pros and cons. Yes, when you have a special needs center, everybody has a diagnosis. Everybody has its own learning needs. And a question that I get from parents, and this is a question that many parents, especially that are on the journey of where do I take my student, will ask, well, what happens when, if I put my child in a classroom where everybody stims, will my child start stimming?
Pick up the behavior.
And it's a complicated question, because yes, there are children that imitate behaviors. There are children that don't. There are children that need the stimming, and that they need a big stimming to cope with their daily life. That's why they wouldn't fit in a mainstream school, because they're too loud. So for us, for example, in Widad, we try to let that stim, or let that thing that is helping them cope and helping them regulate, let it be, unless it becomes completely disruptive to the point where it's becoming a problem. See, our degree or our bar of allowing is much bigger probably than in a class of 25. So in our case, we're very much more lenient than in a classroom of 25, 30 students. So you as a parent have to see, okay, where do I think that my child is going to be able to self-regulate better? Where is he going to be able to have a more natural day-to-day? Am I going to be constantly masking my
Yes.
diagnosis for the benefit of the class, or is it better for me to be in a classroom where I don't have to mask as much?
Be myself.
That's where the parents need to stop and think, okay, what kind of child do I have?
Can I add to that? So I think just coming back to your question of the social aspect or the socializing aspect, I think a hybrid situation is ideal.
Yeah.
And many of our schools have what we call the buddy program.
Yeah.
And we will have students from special schools coming into our schools and spending a day there in our classrooms, playing games, swimming, doing stuff with our kids. And one day in a week, they do come in. We have that's the Best Buddies program. We also have a program called Hello Zindagi, where these children invite children from special schools, and they plan games for them. They plan dance sessions, food. They prepare food as part of their CAS projects or their SUPWs, their socially useful productive work, and they invite children. So and they love it because they prepare for it. They invite the children in. They dance with them, they sing with them, they play games with them, they give them prizes, and they learn so much because it's mutual, right? So it's programs like this. We had a gentleman, I forget his name now, but he introduced us to the Rafiki project. The Rafiki means friend in Arabic.
Yes.
And so the Rafiki project, because he said, who is inviting these children for their birthday parties? Why are they not sitting with them during break or having lunch in regular schools? And we said, our school does. But he said, no, but is it happening in all schools? And we said, well, even within the school, everyone is not as open-minded. So how do we bring everybody in? So I think these are some of the things. So hybrid model, I think, is really useful.
We have a handful of students that do part-time with us, part-time in mainstream.
Yeah.
And it's starting to become a trend. It's starting to become. It is a beautiful option.
Because I had somebody told me about this buddy program, and that is why I wanted you to come and mention it yourself. It's beautiful, and as a mother, I believe children are children. You as adult, you need to teach them because they're so innocent. I go to parks and sometimes Ahmed, my son, he's stimming and he's clapping and they'll be laughing, and I have learned so much in this journey. I'll just go to them and I'll tell them about autism and it's stimming and he does it, and they're so fine the next time. So it's about teaching them. And GEMS Modern Academy, I really want to mention it. There's this buddy program, you call it, because I've heard about it from parents, and it's beautiful. I mean, I think integrating them, it's a beautiful idea, and it should be done more. And Nargis, one topic that is so important, everybody talks about it, LSAs, learning support assistants or shadow teachers. You need one when the school asks for it. Some of the mainstream schools have their own LSAs. Some of the parents bring their own if they're allowed. What is the role of LSA? And somewhere I feel there are parents who are struggling with the LSAs as well, because they say that my child became dependent on the LSA. Instead of help, he's completely dependent and it's not working. So how is the accountability of LSAs done in mainstream, or is there any body that keeps a check on them? And how do you link the LSA with the main classroom teacher? Because that is also a struggle, because as you said, the main teacher has so much pressure on her as well, because I understand it's a big classroom. So what's the accountability? So
now KHD has streamlined the LSAs, and the schools have to have regular contracts with them. But I think, how do you select an LSA, or when do you know that a child needs an LSA? And that's where the inclusion department comes in. And if they see the child is struggling, not able to cope, even with a buddy, that's the first thing we do. First, we allot a buddy. And I have to commend the buddies. They're so close to my heart, because these kids are phenomenal, and they will just handle the child till as much as they can. And in fact, they're so possessive that sometimes they say, no, we don't want an LSA, I'm there. So it's really amazing. But I think once the school makes that decision that yes, this child will benefit from having an LSA, then it really depends on the inclusion department, the SENCO and her team. I can only speak for my school or for the schools in GEMS Education. We not only have we have a corporate head of inclusion who comes into our schools and makes sure all our processes and practices are in place. But we also go to someone like Louise Dawson, who's got her own,
Yeah.
organization, and she comes in and trains, has specific LSA teacher and TA trainings, because sometimes there are 3 adults in a room. There's a teacher, there's a teaching assistant, and there's an LSA. So, but how does that triangulation take place? So what is the role of the LSA is first defined. The LSA is onboarded, undergoes training, is introduced to the child. You'll be amazed what schools do. Who is the child's team? So those are identified right from the conductor and the driver to the LSA, the aunties who are in the corridors. They all have to be briefed about the child, and that's what happens. But coming back to your LSA, yes, it's an expensive affair as well, and I have to say that parents feel the pinch in their pockets, and therefore it's never recommended lightly. They now have satellite LSAs, so they have one LSA for 2 children or one LSA for 3 children.
That's amazing.
So and schools are doing that when they know parents are struggling. The only thing we don't want is the parent volunteering as the LSA. That's counterproductive. That doesn't make sense to us. And that's the only thing we don't really allow. But I think does a child become dependent on the LSA? It depends on all LSAs are not qualified, I have to say. And sometimes when a parent can't afford it, you just want somebody there to manage the child, and make sure that the child is learning. So the teacher puts the systems in place. The teacher cannot absolve herself and say it's the LSA's responsibility. No, it's the teacher's responsibility. It is not the LSA's responsibility. LSA is only there to assist, but it is the teacher's response. So I think regular training, that's key. I think sensitization, not only the LSA but the entire class, to make sure, because children are great at helping other children, and we've seen that happen brilliantly in classes. And sometimes, like, we have a student who will randomly start shouting and stuff, and there is a girl who just says, she'll just hold his hand and she'll say, "Can we settle down?
No.
Do you want to take a walk? That's not the way. Please have a seat." And he responds beautifully to that child. So these are the mechanisms.
So
that schools
when
have.
a special child comes to your classroom, do you inform the rest of the class?
Yes, we have a special session with the class.
That's amazing.
We sensitize the class. We have to, because the acceptance is so important. And if the class doesn't accept, it's in my time, in the last 15, 16 years that I've been at Modern, I don't think I've ever seen children in a class rejecting a child.
It's amazing.
In fact, they're highly supportive. They will speak up for the child.
I think acceptance leads to accommodating these kids.
Yes.
Once they accept, and what needs to be taught to them is that they are as normal as kids as them. It's this neurotype. They're just different.
I have to say there are types of schools. I'm talking of one extreme where there's complete acceptance and there's a huge focus on special education. There are some schools that aren't, and I think those are some of the experiences some parents would have had. But if they go into a school where systems are proper, and that's why we say, don't really just look for don't ask what's your policy for it. No, find out what are your process. How is my child going to be helped? How is my child going to be integrated into the system? What are some of your inclusive?
Do you provide any observational periods for the kids?
We do,
like
and it varies. We do, and it varies from child to child.
Okay.
I remember we recently had a case where a child just was not adapting and adjusting, and when the level of disruption for the class is so high, despite children trying to adjust, that's when we say, can we have the child staying at home and receiving therapy at home until the child regulates and then comes back into school. Sometimes that happens too.
Yes.
And we find when the child comes back after a month or two, the child is so much better adjusted
Preparing
and
the
adapted.
child.
Yes, preparing.
Yeah.
For
but Lucia, we're talking about the kids who can adjust and adapt in the main classrooms, but there is another side on the spectrum that is severe. Non-speaking, high behavior, aggressive, and Vedad has kids like those. One of my twin is in that side, aggressive and non-speaking. So
this is when you have to be, as a parent, clear on the same question again: what do I want for my children? For many parents, mainstream education is like, oh, I want my child to be in mainstream education because that is normal. And the parents that have had a diagnosis, they want to, let's be as normal as possible. Let's keep everything as normal as possible. Everything has to be like everybody's. He needs to blend in. But sometimes that is not going to be completely possible. And if you have a child that you kind of foresee that an LSA is going to become a element of a person that is there to, that will probably be ending up doing everything for the child, that is going to cause a prompt dependency,
Yes.
that is going to eliminate or partially reduce the independence, the confidence. Do you want that, even though it's in a normal school? You need to ask a lot of questions to yourself. Do you think that, which is another thing that happens also, the fact that a child has an LSA is also, even though there's acceptance, and I love that there is these dynamics of acceptance happening in schools, at the end, there's a child that is the only one in the classroom that has an adult next to him all the time. That is, at the end, the one that stands out. And even though children, which needs to be done, the acceptance and the dynamics of learning what is autism and explaining to everybody what autism or what Down syndrome is, all of that, at the end, you need to evaluate whether do you want your child to be the one that has the LSA next to him all the time and that has a chance to become very prompt dependent from that LSA, or do you prefer to be in a place where there's no LSA needed, but everybody around him has a diagnosis? So there's a lot of pros and cons again here. What do you want for your child at the end? What do you think is
Can I
better?
just add, I have a slightly different perspective here, Lucia, and I think sometimes a child needs an LSA to keep them on track,
Yeah.
to make sure that, like you're saying,
Yeah.
the prompts at the right times. And a child then would be really suited to mainstream,
Yes.
other than the fact that they
Yes.
need this prompt.
Yes.
So if the child is benefiting from the
There you
LSA,
go. Yeah.
then I think
Yeah, there
they
you go.
definitely need
Yeah.
it. But I think the child sometimes becomes overly dependent on the exactly what you were saying. And when that happens, that's not a good thing.
Yeah.
Because then the child loses self-functionality in
Yeah.
terms of,
Yeah.
regulation, etc.
Yeah.
But that's for a school to be intuitive towards and to notice.
Yeah.
And
Exactly.
there have been times when our inclusion department have come and said, we need to swap LSAs now because
Yes.
so-and-so is getting too
Yes.
dependent.
Yeah.
And that's why the satellite LSA works well, because then the child knows that this LSA is not only for me. It'll also, so I need an LSA in a math class, but I don't need the LSA in my singing, swimming,
Yeah.
PE, English class.
Yeah.
I don't need one.
Yeah.
So I think it's where that's where a really hypersensitive school who understands, who's got a really strong special
Yes.
education department.
Trained,
Yes.
well-trained school, well-trained staff.
Yeah.
And Nargis, sometimes, since it's a spectrum and we are talking about diversity in the special community as well, there are kids who are high functioning, they're speaking, they are very good academics, but they are brilliant at masking.
Yes.
Yes.
They'll mask all day.
Yes.
They have, and I'll also highlight bullying as well, because they appear fine, they speak fine, but they're struggling inside.
Yes.
They'll mask it all day.
It's
They face
exhausting.
bullying as well.
Yes.
Eventually what happens, they come home and they
Let it all
unleash
out. Yeah.
the beast in them, and
Yeah.
then the parents, they suffer, they struggle.
Yeah.
So sometimes mainstream schools, they will handle the child really well until grade 3 or grade 4, and then when the child is growing up, the problems, they become more clear, and then at home anxiety and other psychological issues start.
Thank
So
you for asking that
how do you-
question. So I think there's two things. One is the restorative practices and the circle times that we have which children participate in, and that gives every child an opportunity to speak and share. And there have been cases where not actually, it's regular practice. Even the counselors will sit with them. On an amusing side, there are two high functioning autistic students, and they say we play our autism card well.
Yes.
We know when to play the autism card,
Yeah.
and we
Yeah.
love them for that because they are openly saying it.
Yeah.
And there are times when they say, don't give me any special treatment. I know I'm autistic. I will handle it.
Yeah.
So we've got kids of that
Yeah.
extreme. But there are
Yes.
children, yes, who will bottle in and will not share. But then if a school has restorative practices in place and restorative chats, and they have a values-based education system where these things are talked about, and they have a strong anti-bullying policy. And that's why the buddies are important, because they look out for them and they make sure. And if they are There have been times when children have come up and said, so and so is constantly talking rudely or talking down to so and so. Can you intervene, please? And they go to the counselor and they speak to them, and the counsellors intervene. So it's not a utopian. I told you there's no school that's perfect. If they claim to be perfect,
No.
something's wrong.
Something's wrong.
Yeah. So, but I think it's having those systems in place. During the pandemic, we had our senior girls. They came and they started. They coded an online platform, and they call it Unraveling Thoughts. And they said if anybody is feeling pressured or feeling anxious or whatever, they can talk to us anonymously. The girls did it themselves.
Beautiful.
We're so proud of them. Unraveling Thoughts. Many of our schools get them trained by Lighthouse Arabia on picking up these cues and understanding them. It's called something really nice. It's called emotional first aid or something like that.
Wow.
Where they're actually taught they're actually taught
Yeah.
to pick all these things up.
Yeah.
And as they grew, so we have a young student called Gopika. She took it upon herself. She says, use the right language. She says, you can't be saying things like, and children don't say it, but she must have picked it up somewhere. And she says, you can't use words like, youngsters usually use words like retard or like,
Yeah.
She says, you can't, this is not language that's, and she said, why? And she had assembly after assembly, grade wise, she called students in. She gave up her own time and she had assemblies. We're just so proud of this young girl.
Wow.
And like her, we have so many other youngsters.
That's amazing. That's amazing. It's again the system in the school
Yeah.
and importance of mental health of students. That is a topic that's not discussed, and I think it's very, very important that you talk to them. You know what's going on in the heads, and this generation is not very open with the parents. So school is the first place where they learn and they can express. And Lucia, with special schooling, one word that I use for the teachers is compassion. You can't do it without compassion. And I have visited Vedad, and your teachers are compassionate. I love it. The energy, the vibe, it's beautiful. And I really want to mention it. It's a beautiful place. With special schooling, my biggest concern, the financial aspect of special schooling.
Yes.
They're expensive. Parents, I know, they want to go to this special school. They go, they visit, and because I'm on social media, they're like, it's amazing, we love it, but the price, we can't afford it. Because it's not only the school time you're looking at, in the evening you want to keep them engaged as well, and everything comes with a price.
Yes.
And some kids need therapy as well. And
Yeah.
Vedad is a place that is providing social skills and therapy under one roof. But the price.
Yeah.
So what do you suggest parents? How can, I don't know, how can you,
And
what is the right question to even put here?
And I think it's not only the price for special schools, it's the price in general, because it's even if you're in mainstream education, you need to pay for that shadow that takes a toll in your pockets and everything. So it is the therapies, it breaks my heart. But what we have to do about it is what you're doing. This is what needs to be done. There has to be a group of parents that keep fighting like you are doing, so that there is a wider awareness of this, so that as a society we help more, and as governments and as, I don't know, or international organizations start helping these parents. Because special education is expensive, because the people that provide the special education are highly trained, very hard to find. They have to have this special DNA in their inside.
Yes.
There are very few of them, and this, at the end, these therapists and these teachers, they are valuable, and you need a lot of them. Vedad has a policy of no more than 8 students per classroom with 2 special educators. That's a high ratio or a low ratio that is very, very economical,
very
demanding. Yeah. So to what we need to see this is as a society. What is happening to to the provision that we have for these children as a country, as a continent, as the world, you know?
Yeah, can I suggest 3 things? I think this would get into policy actually. If we talk to, government regulators or the regulators across the table, why can't this become part of corporate social responsibility?
Yes.
Just as we have sustainability as part of, why cannot it become part of corporate social responsibility? Why can't we have, there are so many business houses who want to support. There are so many individuals, philanthropically minded individuals who want to support. So if we systematize that, and the government can actually have a point system that if you support a school with special needs, then you get these allowances.
Yes.
Maybe you don't pay VAT. I don't know.
Yeah.
There could be things that we could look
Reforms.
around.
Reforms. These are the educational reforms.
Yeah.
So, Nargis,
policy reforms by the regulators.
like we need to come up with something that's creative, that's attractive, because education is a basic right, and we don't label the kids here. All the kids on this planet, they deserve education, right education. So what are the basic policy changes that you would recommend to anybody right now listening to you from the government, the educational reforms that you think you can do in the mainstream and that is going to help in a broader spectrum to both sides of the kids, special and...
So I think 3 things. One is I think that every school, of course, is an inclusive school. That's a given. But I think we should also include the hybrid model, allowing some students to be part of regular school and special school, and that blend of both, so that
buddy programs.
Yes.
More than buddy programs actually. A little more than buddy, because that becomes a sort of temporary thing. I would recommend a strong CSR policy, a corporate social responsibility, with allowances given by the government. Whatever the point system is, it could be the Rafiki point system, whatever point system, where if they commit to supporting schools that are offering special education or LSAs or sponsoring LSAs as part of their CSR, they get certain, concessions.
I think that another thing that we are always forgetting, or that we forget because we cater for students until 18 or until they graduate.
Very important.
Yeah.
What happens next? This
What
is the
happens
million-dollar question.
Biggest worry.
Especially in the UAE, is and you can't imagine how many times I have a parent in my office that asks, "What do I do next?"
Yeah.
Because your children are small now or young now, but they're going to reach a point where you're going to ask yourself the same question: What do I do next? And that is where we need to think of ourselves as a country, or Dubai, or the UAE needs to see themselves as a country, and what are we going to provide for these that are turning 18, 19, 20? Where do they go? Do we leave them right at the edge of a cliff? We can't do that.
Which brings us back to the question of what sort of education do you want for your child?
Yeah.
And if a child is not high functioning, or is not able to self-regulate, or is not able to answer a telephone call, or manage their bank accounts, or do stuff like that, what are we setting them up for?
Yeah.
And every child can't be independent, we understand that.
Yeah,
truly.
But if they're not independent, so I think there are categories, right? So one is the high functioning independent lot. Like I have young Johan, who's my teacher's son, my SLT member's son, and high on the autism spectrum, went to Al Noor, and the parents were very clear that they wanted him to to work, and today he's working.
Yeah.
And
but all kids on the spectrum cannot.
They cannot. But what can they do? That's exactly to your question. What can they do? And that's what we're saying. What is that education that we want for them? What are we setting them up for? And that's where, again, the corporates come in.
Yeah.
That if they can be providing a parallel sort of a social responsibility platform where they're getting the students in, and like I do know, we were invited by a particular hotel, and they said your children's artwork, we'll display it. Invite your children for high tea. Parents, mums of children, send them to the spa.
I'm sorry I'm cutting you here, but there are kids on the spectrum who remain dependent on the caregivers. They are,
but
they're
see,
severe.
for example, even in those cases, what about providing workshops, providing
Let's go to the basics. Residential homes.
Residential homes, assisted living,
Assisted living, exactly.
Finding daily occupations for those children, because one day they're going to be adults that
And the parents are not going to be there.
they're not going to be there. So all of this is what a government needs to think
So
about.
they have it.
Yeah.
I think they have it for the Emiratis. I don't know if it exists for the
We need more.
expatriates.
Yeah,
Yes.
there are a few,
Yes.
but we
That's-
need more.
Yeah.
For example, in countries in Europe and in the UK, you have these job coaches. Okay, so
Yes.
that's the figure of a person who takes this person that has just finished education or whatever they've managed to reach in their education. Okay, now I'm going to help you in whatever shape or form I can help you to go
beautiful.
towards, whether it's successful or not, but to go towards being able to learn a skill, a job, to be hired, to be part of a
To be able to
work-
survive even.
to be able to survive, to be
Alone.
able to be independent in an assisted living environment, to be able to
Yeah.
be. That is what we
So
need.
even
yeah.
if they can do a mechanical task
Yeah.
and they excel at it,
Yeah.
but
Yeah.
identifying, that's where your job
Yes.
coach comes in.
Identifying, yeah.
That they can that this is what they're capable of, this is what they can be good
Yeah.
at, and this is what they should be doing, and
Yeah.
then the provision to allow that
Yeah.
to happen.
Yeah.
I think India has a couple of them. I know
Yes.
we visited. We
Yeah.
visited Mangalore, and we saw this beautiful center where the children were doing things like
Yeah.
some of them just simple ironing, some folding, some creating craft, some doing mechanical, just sticking labels,
And you know
just
what?
sticking labels. But they would
They're usually the best at it.
Yeah.
Because they don't complain.
Yeah.
They are hard workers.
fixated on
They're
getting
very
it right.
fixated.
Yeah.
They're very thorough. They won't make mistakes, and their workforce that is much more reliable than
My only
many,
worry
yeah.
with all of this would be having checks and balances in place, because there can be abuse of power.
Yes,
Yes,
that's
they
right.
can
there
be-
have been
Yeah.
cases.
Yes.
Yeah.
So I
This
think
is why
having
that-
checks and balances.
That person that
That's why you need
supervises is so
accountability.
important.
Yeah.
There always has to be somebody
It's such a
supervising.
topic we can talk forever and
Ever.
ever and ever. So we are at the end of the episode. Nargis, one message to the new parents who want to come to mainstream. They're worried, they're upset, and they're still struggling with acceptance. One quick message to them.
I think parents, you are the biggest advocates for your children. You know what's best for your child. Don't try to hide it. Don't try to, feel sorry for yourself. You'll go through that pattern of feeling sorry for yourself. But I think it's really important to acknowledge first. Acceptance is the biggest liberator. Once you accept it, you can support your child. And what better than supporting? It's not about social stigmas. It's about making sure your child gets the right support. Do it, parents. This is what you need for your child.
Beautiful. Thank you so much. Lucia?
I know, because of seeing many parents, guilt is something that comes along. And I always say this, whatever you're doing for your child is the best for your child, okay? Whatever you can do, whatever effort, because the guilt many times comes from, am I doing enough? Am I reading enough? Am I educating myself enough? Am I searching well for the perfect place?
Being there.
They're constantly feeling like they're not doing enough.
Yes.
That is normal. The first thing that we need to understand is that feeling is normal, that everybody goes through it. So feel good about it, even though it's going to still be there. Feel good about it. And whatever you're doing is the right thing. You are already doing the effort. Don't think and be worried constantly because am I doing all that I can? Because yes, you are.
And try until you find the right
Yes.
educational pathway
Yes.
for
Can
you.
I just add one more thing? And I think compassion fatigue is a reality.
Yes, absolutely.
There is a time when you're exhausted.
Exhausted.
You just don't have it within. Take a break.
Yeah.
Take a break.
Yeah.
And if you take a break, you just come back.
I always use
You
this.
bounce back better.
I always use this analogy. In airplanes, they usually say, put your mask first before helping others.
Best
And
example.
this applies perfectly for this. You want to help first take care of yourself, first be in a good place, and then you will help as beautifully as you can. But be sure that you're in the right place. Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Thank you so much, both of you. There is so much to learn from you. 1 hour was not enough. And Gulshan is also a mentor for me. I've learned a lot from her as well. I have followed you. GEMS is doing amazing. The Buddy program. I mean, these are the small things that matter to our community. So thank you so much for raising such amazing students. And I hope it sets an example for others to follow as well.
Thank you.
And I love your work.
Thank you.
Keep doing it.
I'll convey everything you said to our team.
And Lucia, thank you so much for presenting the side that is so close to my heart, special schooling, special schools. And to all those listening, do not, as a parent, run after this paranoia that my child needs to fit in the mainstream school. Special education is as beautiful as mainstream. As a parent, like both the experts told us, that you know your child better. Try. Go to the schools, meet the teams, and then decide. And if your child needs to be prepared for the mainstream first through therapies, do not hesitate. Accept it, and the system is trying to help you. We are a lot better than where we were 10 years back.
Yes.
And both the school systems, there's no comparison. Each has its own, beauty.
Yeah.
And my kids go to a special school. I am proud of them. I'm proud of the school, and it makes me emotional. If I talk more, I'm going to cry, because they have come a long way. And I can't thank the special education, especially because there's so much taboo around it. So until the next episode, lots of love and tons of power to your special angel. And please take care of your mental and physical health both.
Thank you.
Thank you.